Amara Thompson had always dreamed of moments like this, sitting in the plush leather seat of a private jet, surrounded by gleaming interiors and the soft hum of luxury. At just 22 years old, she felt out of place, but grateful. Her friends, family had invited her along for a weekend getaway to their beach house, a reward for surviving months of grueling work as an intern at one of the city's top law firms. The idea of escaping the chaos of her daily life, even if only for a few days, was thrilling. The morning sun filtered through the windows as Amara adjusted herself in her seat, trying not to appear too overwhelmed. Around her, the other passengers chatted casually about their latest investments, vacations, and social events. They were all older than her, dressed in designer clothes that screamed wealth and privilege. Amara glanced down at her own outfit, simple blouse and jeans, and suddenly felt self-conscious. She reminded herself that she belonged here because she worked hard, not because of fancy handbags or flashy cars. As the flight crew prepared the aircraft for takeoff, everyone settled into their seats. Amara pulled out her phone to text her best friend Nia, updating her on the surreal experience. Just as she hit send, the man who owned the jet entered the cabin. He was tall, with silver hair and an air of authority that commanded attention. His name was Mr. Harrison, and he carried himself like someone used to getting what he wanted. He nodded curtly at the others before his gaze landed on Amara. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Amara offered a polite smile. But instead of returning it, Mr. Harrison frowned deeply, his lips curling into a sneer. "Who is this?" he asked sharply, gesturing toward Amara without bothering to hide his irritation. The question hung heavy in the air, silencing the light chatter around them. Amara froze, unsure how to respond. Before she could say anything, one of her friends nervously explained, "Oh, this is Amara. She's joining us for the trip." Mr. Harrison's frown deepened. "Joining you? I don't recall approving that." His tone was icy, dripping with disdain. Amara felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She tried to remain calm, reminding herself that this wasn't personal. It couldn't be. Still, she couldn't ignore the way his eyes swept over her, lingering on her dark skin and modest attire as though they offended him somehow. One of the other passengers attempted to smooth things over. "Come now, Mr. Harrison, there's plenty of room. It won't hurt to have one more guest." But Mr. Harrison wasn't having it. He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms firmly. "This is my jet," he said, emphasizing the word with a sharp edge, "and I decide who flies on it. If you want to bring outsiders, perhaps you should book your own transportation next time." The room grew silent except for the faint whirring of the engines starting up outside. Amara's heart pounded in her chest. Outsiders? Was that what he thought of her? She glanced at her friends, hoping they'd stand up for her, but most avoided her gaze altogether. Only one of them spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Harrison, please. She's our friend. There's no reason to make a fuss." But Mr. Harrison wasn't listening. He snapped his fingers, summoning one of the security guards waiting near the door. "Escort her off," he ordered coldly. "We're leaving." Amara's stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. The guard approached her, his expression apologetic yet firm. "Miss, I'm sorry, but you'll need to come with me." Reluctantly, Amara gathered her things, her hands trembling as she stuffed her phone and wallet into her bag. Every step toward the exit felt heavier than the last, each movement punctuated by the weight of shame and disbelief. As she stepped off the jet, the bright sunlight seemed mocking, contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. A taxi idled nearby, and the guard helped her into it, offering a quiet, "I'm sorry." Once inside, Amara stared blankly out the window as the car pulled away. Behind her, the sleek private jet taxied toward the runway, carrying the people who had abandoned her so easily. For the first few minutes, anger burned hot in her chest. How dare he treat her like that? What gave him the right to judge her based on nothing more than her appearance? But as the reality of the situation sank in, anger gave way to sadness. She replayed the scene in her mind, dissecting every detail. The looks exchanged between her friends, the dismissive wave of Mr. Harrison's hand, the way no one had truly fought for her. It wasn't just about being kicked off a plane. It was about feeling invisible, unworthy, less than. By the time the taxi reached her apartment, exhaustion had replaced both anger and sadness. Amara trudged upstairs, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from friends checking in, but she ignored them. Instead, she grabbed her laptop and opened a blank document. For hours, she poured her emotions onto the screen, writing a raw and honest account of what had happened. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking outside her window. Little did she know, those words would change everything, for better or worse. The night was long and restless for Amara. After posting her story online, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. Her heart raced as she watched the notifications flood in. Likes, comments, shares, all pouring in faster than she could keep up with. At first, it felt surreal. She hadn't expected anyone outside her small circle of friends to care about what happened on that private jet. But as the hours ticked by, her post gained traction, spreading far beyond anything she had imagined. People from all walks of life began sharing their own stories in the comments section. Some recounted being turned away from high-end restaurants or hotels because of their race. Others talked about feeling out of place in exclusive clubs or events they were invited to but never truly welcomed at. Each story resonated deeply with Amara, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight. Yet alongside the solidarity came waves of anger. Anger toward the man who had humiliated her. Anger toward a society that still allowed such discrimination to thrive, and even anger toward herself for letting it happen without fighting back harder. As dawn broke through the cracks in her blinds, Amara finally closed her laptop and lay down, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying the incident, dissecting every detail. The way Mr. Harrison's voice dripped with contempt, the awkward silence from her so-called friends, the security guard's apologetic expression. It gnawed at her, not just because of how she'd been treated, but because of what it represented. She thought about her father, Robert Thompson, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from nothing. He always told her to rise above people like Mr. Harrison, to stay focused on her goals and let their ignorance roll off her back. But tonight, lying there wide awake, Amara struggled to follow that advice. This wasn't just about one bad experience. It was about years of microaggressions, subtle slights, and outright hostility she'd faced simply for being who she was. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Nia, her best friend since childhood, calling to check in. Amara hesitated before answering, unsure if she wanted to talk about it anymore. But when she finally picked up, Nia didn't waste time asking questions. "I saw your post," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Amara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me feels like I shouldn't have posted it. I mean, Dad would hate it. You know how he is about keeping things quiet," Nia scoffed. "Girl, please. Your dad needs to get over himself. What happened to you wasn't right and you deserve to call it out. Besides, look at the response. People are standing with you." "I know," Amara replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But what if it blows up in my face? What if people start attacking me instead of supporting me?" Nia paused, then spoke firmly. "Listen, Amara, you can't control how everyone reacts. All you can do is speak your truth. And honestly, if someone has a problem with you speaking up against racism, then they're not worth worrying about." Her words struck a chord, but Amara couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. She knew Nia meant well, but the thought of facing backlash scared her. What if this affected her career? What if future employers saw her post and decided she was too difficult to hire? These fears swirled in her mind, making it hard to focus on anything else. Later that morning, after forcing herself to eat a quick breakfast, Amara decided to take a walk around her neighborhood. She needed fresh air and space to clear her head. As she strolled past rows of brownstones and bustling cafes, her phone continued buzzing in her pocket. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pulled it out to scroll through the latest updates. One message caught her eye. A direct message from someone named Marcus. "Hey, Amara," the message read. "I saw your post, and I just wanted to say thank you for speaking out. I've been where you are, and it takes guts to put yourself out there like that. Keep going. You're inspiring people." Tears pricked her eyes as she read the words. For the first time since the incident, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't just about venting her frustration. Maybe it was about something bigger. Maybe her voice could spark change, however small. By the time she returned home, her inbox was overflowing with similar messages. Strangers from across the country and even abroad were reaching out to share their support. Some offered words of encouragement, while others shared resources or asked how they could help amplify her message. Amara spent the rest of the afternoon replying to as many as she could, grateful for the kindness flooding her way. But amidst the positivity, there was also criticism. A few users accused her of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. One particularly scathing comment read, "If you can't handle the rules of high society, maybe you shouldn't be there in the first place." Amara stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, but she stopped herself. Arguing wouldn't change their minds, and she refused to stoop to their level. Instead, she turned her attention back to the supportive voices. They reminded her why she had written the post in the first place, not for revenge or recognition, but to shed light on an issue that needed addressing. Discrimination wasn't new, but perhaps her story could serve as a catalyst for meaningful conversations. As evening fell, Amara found herself sitting on her couch once more, staring at her laptop. The initial shock of going viral had worn off, replaced by a sense of purpose. She realized that while she couldn't undo what had happened on that jet, she could use it as fuel to push forward. The world might not change overnight, but every step counted. Just as she was about to close her computer for the night, another notification popped up. This time, it wasn't from a stranger. The sender's name made her heart skip a beat. Robert Thompson, her father. His message was brief but loaded with meaning. "We need to talk." For a moment, Amara froze, unsure how to feel. Their relationship had been strained for years, ever since she chose law school over joining his company. He'd always pushed her to prioritize professionalism over passion, to blend in rather than stand out. Now here he was, reaching out after seeing her post. She wondered if he was angry, disappointed, or maybe, just maybe, proud. Whatever his intentions, one thing was certain: tomorrow would bring a new chapter, and for the first time in days, Amara felt ready to face it head-on. The next morning, Amara woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. For a brief moment, she forgot about everything: the viral post, the humiliation on the jet, the flood of messages, and simply enjoyed the calmness of the new day. But reality came rushing back as soon as she reached for her phone. The first thing she saw was her father's message again. "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. Those 4 words carried so much weight, especially coming from him. Robert Thompson wasn't the type of man who said things lightly. He was deliberate, calculated, and always in control. Growing up, Amara had learned early on that conversations with her father weren't casual. They were strategic, often laced with lessons or expectations. Their relationship hadn't been easy, not since she decided to pursue law instead of following in his footsteps at Robert Thompson Enterprises. She remembered their last argument vividly: his deep sighs, the way he shook his head when she told him she wanted to fight for justice rather than profits. "You'll regret this," he'd said then, his voice tinged with disappointment. And now, years later, here they were again, on the brink of another conversation that could either mend or further strain their bond. Amara debated whether to respond right away. Part of her wanted to ignore the message, to avoid whatever lecture might come her way. But another part, a stronger, braver part, knew she couldn't run from this. If anything, her father deserved an explanation. After all, she had aired their family name publicly without thinking twice about how it might affect him. Taking a deep breath, she typed out a simple reply. Okay. When? Within minutes, her phone buzzed with a response. It wasn't what she expected. Instead of demanding a meeting over coffee or asking her to visit his office, he sent an address and a time, 10 a.m., downtown. No explanation, no pleasantries, just instructions. Amara frowned. This wasn't like him. Normally, he'd have his assistant call ahead, arrange something formal. Something about this felt different. She dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue blazer and tailored trousers. If nothing else, she wanted to look professional, even if she didn't feel it. As she stepped outside her apartment building, she spotted the car almost immediately. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom idled near the curb, its polished surface gleaming under the morning sun. Amara froze, her heart skipping a beat. She recognized the car instantly. It belonged to her father. What was it doing here? Before she could process the sight fully, the chauffeur stepped out. He was impeccably dressed in a crisp uniform, his posture straight and respectful. "Miss Thompson?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. Amara nodded, still stunned. "Yes, that's me." The chauffeur opened the rear door, revealing the luxurious interior of the car. Plush leather seats, wood-paneled accents, and a faint scent of expensive cologne greeted her. On the seat lay a small envelope with her name written neatly on the front. Curiosity got the better of her and she picked it up, sliding her finger under the flap to open it. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. "Amara, I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Let's talk about what comes next." Dad. Her breath caught in her throat. Proud. That single word hit her harder than she expected. She couldn't remember the last time her father had praised her, at least not sincerely. Most of their interactions revolved around critiques or advice, delivered in his trademark no-nonsense style. Yet here he was, acknowledging her courage, validating her actions. It was unexpected, disarming, and oddly comforting. The ride to downtown was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional click of the turn signal. Amara stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Skyscrapers loomed overhead, their glass facades reflecting the bright blue sky. Street vendors called out to passers-by and cyclists weaved through traffic with practiced ease. Despite the chaos, there was a rhythm to it all, a sense of life moving forward, unstoppable and relentless. When the car finally pulled up to a towering office building, Amara hesitated before stepping out. This wasn't just any building. It was headquarters for Robert Thompson Enterprises, the empire her father had built from scratch. She hadn't been inside since she was a teenager, tagging along on one of his rare family days at work. Back then, she'd marveled at the grandeur of the lobby, the marble floors, the golden elevators. Now, as an adult, she noticed the subtle details she'd missed before. The security guards stationed discreetly in corners, the hushed whispers of employees passing by, the air of authority that permeated every inch of the space. The chauffeur escorted her to the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. As the doors slid shut, Amara took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited her. When the elevator dinged open moments later, she stepped into a sprawling penthouse suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while modern art pieces adorned the walls. In the center of the room stood her father, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, father and daughter, separated by years of misunderstanding but united by blood. Finally, Robert broke the silence. "Amara," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, unsure how to respond. He gestured toward a seating area and they both sat down. For a few seconds, the only sound was the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Then, without preamble, Robert began to speak. "I read your post," he said, leaning forward slightly. "And I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You handled yourself with dignity, even in a difficult situation. Not everyone would have done the same." Amara blinked, taken aback by his words. I didn't think you'd approve," she admitted. "You always tell me to stay out of drama." He chuckled dryly. "True, but sometimes staying silent is worse. What happened to you, that wasn't right. And I should have taught you sooner that speaking up doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong." His admission surprised her. Never in her life had she heard her father admit fault, let alone apologize. It was as if the roles had reversed. He was the one seeking approval now, hoping she'd understand where he was coming from. "What are you saying, Dad?" she asked cautiously. "Why did you bring me here?" Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because I want to help you. That man on the jet, the owner, he's someone I know. His behavior was unacceptable and I intend to address it. But more importantly, I want to support you in whatever you decide to do next. Whether it's continuing to advocate for change or focusing on your career, I'll stand behind you." Amara felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't the cold, distant man she'd grown up with. This was someone who cared, who saw her struggles and wanted to be part of the solution. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But why now? Why after all these years?" Robert sighed, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Because I realized I've been wrong about a lot of things. About you, about myself, about what really matters. Seeing your post reminded me of that. You're brave, Amara, braver than I ever was, and I don't want to lose you because of my mistakes." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "It's not too late, Dad. We can fix this. Together." Haisim smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good. Because I have an idea, and I think you'll like it." As he began explaining his plan, Amara listened intently, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, not just for her but for both of them. As Robert Thompson outlined his plan, Amara listened intently, her mind racing to keep up with the scope of what he was proposing. Her father wasn't one for small gestures. He thought big, always had, and this idea was no exception. He wanted to use his influence and resources to expose the discriminatory practices that thrived in elite circles, like the ones she'd encountered on the private jet. But more than that, he wanted to empower her to lead the charge. "You've already started something powerful," he said, leaning forward in his chair, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "Your post resonated with people because it's real, it's raw, and now we can take it further. Together." Amara hesitated, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked cautiously. The last thing she wanted was to become a pawn in one of her father's grand schemes, even if his intentions seemed sincere. Robert smiled faintly, sensing her skepticism. "I'm not talking about turning you into some kind of spokesperson or using you for publicity. I'm talking about creating real change that starts with your voice and grows into something bigger, something lasting." He explained that he had connections, friends, colleagues, business partners who could help amplify her message. These were people who held significant sway in industries ranging from tech to fashion to finance. If they worked together, they could shine a spotlight on the systemic issues that allowed discrimination to persist unchecked in spaces meant for privilege and exclusivity. "But why would they listen to me?" Amara asked, still unsure. "I'm just me, a law student trying to figure things out." Her father shook his head firmly. "You're more than that, Amara. You're smart, resilient, and unafraid to speak your truth. That's rare, especially in the world we live in. People will listen because your story is authentic, and authenticity cuts through noise like nothing else." Despite her lingering doubts, Amara couldn't deny the flicker of hope igniting inside her. For so long, she'd felt powerless against the forces of prejudice and inequality. But sitting there with her father, hearing him talk about leveraging his power for good, she began to see possibilities where before there had only been obstacles. "Okay," she said finally, her voice soft but determined. "Let's say I agree to this. What's the first step?" Robert's smile widened, and for a moment Amara saw the man he must have been in his younger years, ambitious, driven, and ready to conquer the world. "The first step is simple," he replied. "We start by making sure the person responsible for kicking you off that plane faces consequences." Amara's eyes widened. "What do you mean? Are you going to sue him or something?" He chuckled lightly. "Not quite. While I'd love nothing more than to drag him into court, that's not the most effective approach here. Instead, we'll hit him where it hurts, his reputation. Trust me, men like him thrive on being admired, respected, and envied. Expose their hypocrisy, and they crumble." Over the next hour, they discussed strategies. Robert revealed that Mr. Harrison, the man who owned the private jet, was heavily invested in several high-profile ventures, including luxury resorts and exclusive membership clubs. Many of these businesses relied on maintaining an image of sophistication and inclusivity. If word got out that their owner had openly discriminated against someone based on race, it could cost him dearly, not just financially, but socially as well. "We'll leak the story to the right people," Robert explained. "Journalists, influencers, industry leaders. Once they know what happened, they won't stay silent. They'll demand answers, and when he tries to defend himself, we'll be ready with evidence." Amara nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the brilliance of the plan. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability, about showing others that actions have consequences, even for those who think they're untouchable. But as much as she appreciated her father's support, Amara knew she couldn't rely solely on him to fight this battle. This was her fight too. She needed to reclaim her agency, to prove to herself that she was capable of standing up not just for herself, but for others like her. "I want to do more than just expose him," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. "I want to create something positive out of this, something that helps people feel seen and heard." Robert raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." "I'm thinking, maybe we start a campaign, something called Access for All. It could focus on breaking down barriers in exclusive spaces, private jets, clubs, hotels, whatever. We'd work with organizations that advocate for diversity and inclusion, hold events, raise awareness. Make it clear that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their background." For a moment, Robert simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he began to nod. "I like it," he said. "It's bold, impactful, and aligns perfectly with what you've already started. Let's do it." And just like that, the gears began turning. Over the following days, father and daughter worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. Robert reached out to his network, rallying support from influential figures who were eager to back the initiative. Meanwhile, Amara poured her energy into crafting the campaign's mission statement, designing its logo, and reaching out to activists and advocates who shared her passion for equality. One afternoon, as they reviewed drafts of promotional materials, in Robert's office, Amara paused, looking at her father with newfound admiration. "Dad," she said softly, "thank you for believing in me, for helping me turn something bad into something good." Robert placed a hand on hers, his touch firm yet gentle. "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me of what truly matters. Sometimes it takes seeing the world through someone else's eyes to realize how blind you've been." Their reconciliation wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old wounds that hadn't fully healed, but it was progress. For the first time in years, Amara felt like she and her father were truly on the same team, working toward a common goal. As the campaign gained momentum, Amara found herself stepping into a role she never imagined, that of a leader. She gave interviews, wrote op-eds, and spoke at conferences, sharing her story and encouraging others to join the movement. Everywhere she went, she carried the lessons her father had taught her, not just about resilience, but about the importance of using privilege for good. And then came the day when everything clicked into place. A major news outlet published an exposé on Mr. Harrison, detailing not only the incident with Amara, but also allegations from other victims who had faced similar discrimination at his hands. Within hours, the backlash was swift and severe. Sponsors pulled funding, members canceled subscriptions, and social media erupted with outrage. Mr. Harrison issued a public apology, but it did little to salvage his tarnished reputation. Watching the fallout unfold, Amara felt a mix of emotions: satisfaction, relief, and even a twinge of sadness. She didn't enjoy seeing someone fall from grace, but she knew this was necessary. It sent a message, a warning to others who thought they could act without consequence. That evening, as she sat on her couch scrolling through updates on her phone, she received a text from Nia. "You did it, girl. Proud of you." Smiling, Amara typed back a quick reply. "We all did it. Together." For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax, to bask in the knowledge that she had made a difference. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and battles to fight. But she was ready. With her father by her side and a growing community of supporters behind her, Amara knew she could face anything. This was just the beginning. Months had passed since the launch of Access for All, and Amara's life had transformed in ways she never could have predicted. What started as a personal mission to reclaim her dignity had grown into a nationwide movement, sparking conversations about inclusivity and equality in spaces that had long been closed off to marginalized communities. The campaign's slogan, "Everyone deserves a seat at the table," became a rallying cry, appearing on billboards, social media posts, and even protest signs. People from all walks of life embraced it, sharing their own stories and demanding change. Amara found herself at the center of it all, balancing her final semester of law school with her role as the face of the campaign. It wasn't easy. There were late nights spent drafting legal briefs while responding to emails from activists. Early mornings filled with interviews before rushing to class, but she thrived on the challenge. Each day brought new opportunities to make an impact, whether it was speaking at a panel discussion, meeting with corporate leaders to discuss diversity initiatives, or mentoring young students who looked up to her as a role model. Her father, Robert, remained a steadfast ally throughout the journey. Though he initially struggled to adapt to the more grassroots aspects of activism, he quickly learned to embrace them. He attended rallies, donated generously to organizations aligned with the campaign's mission, and used his influence to open doors that might otherwise have remained shut. More importantly, he continued to support Amara emotionally, reminding her to take breaks and celebrate victories no matter how small. One such victory came when a major airline announced plans to implement anti-discrimination training for its staff after partnering with Access for All. The news sent waves of excitement through the team, but none felt it more deeply than Amara. She remembered sitting on that taxi ride home after being kicked off the private jet, feeling powerless and invisible. Now, thanks to her efforts and those of countless others, real progress was being made. Airlines, hotels, and exclusive clubs were beginning to recognize the value of inclusivity, not just as a moral imperative, but as good business practice. But success didn't come without resistance. There were detractors, of course, people who dismissed the campaign as too idealistic or accused Amara of playing the victim. Some even launched smear campaigns, attempting to discredit her work by dredging up old rumors or twisting her words. At first, these attacks rattled her confidence, making her question whether she was cut out for this kind of public scrutiny. But over time, she learned to tune out the noise, focusing instead on the positive feedback pouring in from supporters around the world. One particularly memorable moment occurred during a live TV interview. The host, known for his tough questions, challenged Amara to explain why someone like her, a middle-class law student, should be leading a movement aimed at reforming elite spaces. His tone was condescending, almost mocking, and for a split second, Amara felt the familiar sting of doubt creeping in. But then she took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and smiled calmly. "Because I've experienced firsthand what it's like to be excluded," she replied. her voice steady and unwavering. And because I believe that change starts with people who refuse to accept the status quo. If we wait for permission to lead, nothing will ever get done. The audience erupted into applause, and the host, visibly flustered, moved on to another topic. After the segment ended, messages of support flooded in from viewers praising her poise and determination. That moment solidified something within Amara. She was exactly where she was meant to be. As graduation approached, Amara faced a pivotal decision. Several prestigious law firms had offered her positions, eager to capitalize on her growing reputation as an advocate for justice. Her father encouraged her to accept one of these offers, arguing that it would provide stability and allow her to continue her advocacy work from a position of power. But Amara had other ideas. She decided to take a different path, joining a human rights organization dedicated to fighting systemic discrimination. The pay was modest compared to what she'd been offered elsewhere, but the work aligned perfectly with her values. On her first day, as she walked into the office and introduced herself to her new colleagues, she felt a sense of purpose that no six-figure salary could match. That evening, as she stood outside the building, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up beside her. The chauffeur stepped out, tipping his hat respectfully. "Miss Thompson?" he asked, opening the door. Inside sat her father, smiling warmly. "I thought I'd give you a ride home," he said, gesturing for her to join him. Amara hesitated for a moment, then climbed in, grateful for the gesture. As the car glided smoothly through the city streets, they talked about everything and nothing: the weather, her new job, plans for the future. For the first time in years, their relationship felt effortless, natural. "You've done incredible things, Amara," Robert said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "I'm proud of you. Truly." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." They shared a quiet laugh, both knowing how far they'd come from those tense, awkward days when communication between them seemed impossible. Their bond, once strained by misunderstandings and differing priorities, had grown stronger through shared experiences and mutual respect. When the car pulled up to her apartment building, Amara turned to her father with a mischievous grin. No, maybe next time you can let me drive the Rolls-Royce, just saying." Robert chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe. But don't push your luck." As she stepped out of the car and waved goodbye, Amara felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd imagined. It had thrown challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt her way, but she had risen above them all. Through resilience, courage, and the unwavering support of those who believed in her, she had carved out a place for herself in a world that often tried to keep her out. Back inside her apartment, she poured herself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch, scrolling through photos from recent events. In one picture, she stood alongside Nia and other close friends, their arms raised triumphantly in solidarity. In another, she posed with her father at a charity gala, the two of them smiling broadly for the camera. These images served as reminders of how far she'd come and how much farther she still intended to go. Amara knew the fight for equality wasn't over. There would always be battles to wage, injustices to confront, and voices to amplify. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the victories, however small they might seem, because every step forward mattered. Every act of resistance, every word spoken in defiance of hate, every hand extended in solidarity. It all added up to something greater than any one person could achieve alone. As she drifted off to sleep, that night, Amara dreamed of possibilities yet unexplored, of doors waiting to be opened and barriers ready to be broken. She woke up the next morning with renewed energy, ready to face whatever lay ahead. This was her story, written not in ink, but in action, and it was far from finished.